So now we have this nice login component here, but we also need a way so that when the user is actually signed in, they get passed on to another menu where they can choose either to be a driver or a passenger. Now, right now, they just get this little alert box with a token they can use to authenticate themselves with, but for a real end user, this is probably not going to be what they want to do. So we need to get them moved on to the next menu where they can choose to be either a passenger or a driver. So how do we do that? Well, we have the login screen right now inside index.js. That is where we go to by default, which is the login screen, which is this one we see here. And well, that contains email, password, date, and then we just set an alert box, like I said, with the token. But now we need to pass this token up to a parent component. In this case, I think it's going to be app.js. And then we can pass this token from this component onto another child component, like for example, the driver screen or the passenger screen, so that these two components or containers can use our token key that we get, and they can make lots of different requests to our API for requesting a driver or requesting passengers and so on. So that's what we're going to do now. Let's see. First, I will remove this component didn't mount function because we're not using it. I'll remove that. And then we'll set the token state or set the token property in the state here just to be blank in the beginning. And then we'll say if this state of token is equal to just a blank token, then we're going to return the login screen because the user hasn't logged in yet, so we need to get them logged in and authenticated. And now let's import the login component inside app.js. So import login from screens login. Now remember, the login screen we're displaying right now is actually just being displayed from index.js. So this is just a pure login screen we're displaying. But we need to display login from inside another component so we can pass it on to different screens we have. And now my bundler just seemed to crash right now. Let me try and say yarn run start. There we go. Sorry about that. Now, so remember, we need to change this inside index.js to be app instead. And now you'll notice nothing changed because inside app.js, we are still returning login screen if the user is not logged in. So if I comment this out, then we get the old passenger or driver selection screen that we had before in previous sections. But the point is, of course, now that we now want to get our users authenticated and only show them the driver or passenger screen once they've been authenticated. So now how do we set this token inside of the app.js? That's pretty simple. We just make a handle set token, or you can call it handle change token maybe. And we put in the token value here. And then we can say this.set state and pass, well, just say token. So that's going to set the token, and we'll pass in the value of the token and set it up here. Now, remember also we need to bind handle change token. So this handle change token and this handle change token, bind this. So now it's binded, which is important when you use this inside of a function and you pass it on to other components, which we are going to do now. So here inside login, we pass in handle change token and simply pass in this.handle change token. There we go. Now let's go inside the login screen in here where we have async handle sign in, and let's set or call our function that we just passed in via the properties. So we say this.props handle token change, I believe I called it, and we pass in result data token. Let me just check if I did call it handle token change. I handle change token, that's what I actually called it. So I will just rename this to handle change token. Okay, everyone. Now let's see. It's going to be interesting to see if then setting the token to another value than just being blank, since we're using handle change token, then we should return this screen where you can select either to be a driver or a passenger. And there we go. So it still displays the alert box because that's what we have here first. But then we go on to the passenger or driver selection. Let me just check if the Android version is also working. It looks like it's still working. And then you can go on to the driver or the passenger screen. Now let's remove this alert box here with the token. We don't need that anymore. That was just for debugging purposes. And now, well, we should pass this token. We can pass this token on to the driver generic container or the passenger generic container. So now we can just pass on this token that we set in the state here. So I can say token is equal to this state token inside the driver screen as well as the passenger screen. And now both of these screens can freely make requests to our API that requires authentication. The thing I would like to do now is to maybe shine up this little screen we have here. I have some icons I made here and just make a simple basic split screen right down the middle where you can choose either to be a passenger or a driver. Because it's a little out of style compared to our login screen, it's not so consistent in the style. Either I should have a login screen in the same style as this one, or at least as long as you're consistent in your style in the app, I think that's good. So let's just shine up our little passenger and driver selection screen. So first, let's go ahead and make a new screen that we call driver or passenger. And then remember the good old snippets we have, React Native component with styles. And then we get a nice component written out to us. Now let's see inside of app.js, let's import this driver or passenger screen, driver or passenger from screens, driver or passenger. And then let's go and instead of returning this ugly view we have here, let's return driver or passenger. Now let's reload it, try and sign in, see what happens. We get this white screen with text in component at the top, which is the driver or passenger component. Now let's dial it up a bit so it looks more nice. Let's give it a nice black background, just like in our login component, this black background we have here. Let's select that from the login.js and let's make it inside the style sheet here. Let's create a container style. Give it a flex of 1 and give it a background color, which is the same. Then let's give the style to this outer view here. styles.container. And now, so that we don't have to go and constantly click on sign in to get to this driver passenger component, let's go ahead and set a token already in the state of app.js. So go ahead inside of Postman and make a request onto the auth login endpoint with correct credentials, and then copy and paste the token you get back from our API and paste it into the token property here, just so that it's hard-coded while we are sitting and debugging and creating the layout and so on. So now it goes straight onto the driver or passenger component. Let's go and do some further work on this. So what I'm imagining is that we have basically a screen split in two with a line in the middle, where in the top you can select to be a driver and the bottom you can select to be a passenger. I have made these two icons we can use for the both selections. So in the bottom we have passenger and the top we have a driver. So let's go ahead and put these two icons in the images folder. I will have a link to both of these two icons in the description. So go ahead and download them or use any other icons you like to use. Here's the passenger and here's the steering wheel. Now let's go ahead and import the image component from React Native. Let's save it and then let's try and import an image. Actually, let's first make another view container. Here, let's call it styles.choice container. And so we're going to have two of these containers, and both of them contains an image, and we're going to give both of them a flex of 1, so they each take up half of the space of the screen. Let's go ahead and build further onto this. Let's put in an image, the source, and then let's say require, pass in the path to the images. And let's say we take the passenger first. Now let's take the steering wheel first. It's good to be decisive here. And let's put in a style for this image as well. Let's say styles dot selection image, I'll call it. And then we get a big steering wheel here in the middle. And let's make this choice container here, this style for the choice container. Let's give it a flex of 1. Then let's copy this whole element with the choice container view and the image and paste it so we have two of these images. And now you can see they're sort of overlapping. I think they're not really correct. So let's set a style on the selection image as well. Let's give it a height and a width of 200. Just like that. So now we have these cute steering wheels instead. And let's make the lower one into the passenger icon. So passenger.png instead. And now let's align them into the middle. So let's say in choice container, we can say align items center. And now they're in the middle, and let's also try and say justify content to be center so that on the y-axis they're also centered. So justify content center, that's going to center them on the y-axis as well. So now they're dead center. Okay, so now let's also put a little text on top just to clarify, hey, I'm a driver or I'm a passenger. And let's also have a little line in the middle. We can either use the margin upper or the border on the upper or lower. I'm just gonna go and say, let's take the upper one and set the bottom border. So put in a square bracket here and a square bracket there. And then let's put in a little inline style here where we say border bottom width 1. And that's gonna put a black line here. Then let's also go down in the choice container and say border color to be a white color. Just like that. So now we have a, well, what I think is a nice little divider in the middle. And let's also put in the text now. So we have text imported already. Let's say in the top here we can have text and say I'm a driver. So that's very small text right here, but let's try and style it up a little. So we say styles choice text. And then let's say choice text. Let's put it first to be a color of white. That always helps a bit. And did my bundler just quit its job, or can I still? Nope, it quit its job. So let me just restart my bundler here. Yarn run start. Now there we go. Let's see if the Android version still works. It does. Now, okay. So let's also set a bigger font size. Let's say font size 32. Okay. Now let's also put some text on the passenger. So let's say I'm a passenger. So now we have 2 different sections basically. And we also, I think we should also put a little margin on the bottom of this text. So let's say margin bottom. Let's put it to 12. It's a little too close on the image, I think. That's a little better, maybe 16. Okay. Okay, let's put it to 20. Okay, I'm happy now. Let's set the font weight also to be a nice thin and crisp font weight font we got here. Okay, and remember the old trick we have to do on Android as well. We import platform and set the font family. If platform is Android, we set the font family to be sans serif light, and if not, then we just say undefined. So now it's a little thinner on the Android side. Well, that is it for the layout section, I think. Now we need to add a button as well. Actually, we need to change this view style into a touchable opacity instead. So let's go ahead, import touchable opacity. So both of these sections will basically be a whole button you can press on. Let's just put in touchable opacity instead of view here. There we have a touchable opacity instead of a view. Same here. Now let's see. So now I can tap here and I can tap there to be a passenger or a driver. but nothing is happening because we don't have something happening on the onPress function. And so what we want to happen when we press this button on either I'm a driver or passenger, it's the same as we had before. We just want to say change the is driver or is passenger state. And now instead of having a handle change driver state and put in the is driver value here and say this dot set state is driver, and have that also for the, I'm just gonna be really stupid now and say well, not stupid, but handle change passenger state. I'm just going to show you an example of what we're doing. I mean, why we're doing this. So we say is passenger. So now we have sorry, I'm a little going ahead here, but what I'm trying to show you is now we have 3 different functions for changing different states inside of this component, which is not so nice. Now remember, we did a little trick inside of login where we say handle change with the name and the value instead, so that the property of a given state is just being, you can just change it by changing the name instead of having a new function for every property that you want to change. But I purposely just did this with the handle change token because I wanted you to see why we are doing things that we did the way we're doing it. So now, instead of having all those functions, I'm going to delete them now. Hopefully you didn't type them up with me frantically. So let's say handle change, what do we call it inside login? Handle change, and it's going to be exactly the same with name and value. And we say this dot set state, pass in a name, and set a value. And we could also just remove this function actually. Let's remove that. And let's bind handle change instead of handle change token. And let's pass in handle change here instead of handle change token. And then change inside login the handle change token call here to handle change. Oops. Handle change. And then pass in token. That's the name of the property we're changing now. So now we don't need to have all these different functions for different properties we're trying to change. We can just make it variable basically by having this name property instead. And which we need to do when we're going to use this driver or passenger function. Because this driver or passenger screen is saying, okay, the user selected to be a driver or passenger. Then we're going to set is driver to true if you click on this one, or is passenger to true if you click on I'm a passenger. So then we pass in handle change here and say this dot handle change. And let's also delete this style sheet down here because we're not using it at all inside of app.js. Now inside driver or passenger, we need to call this dot handle change. So when you click or do a on press on this touchable opacity, we need to call this props handle change. And we need to call, we need to change the is driver property. And then we're going to set it to true. That is if you tap on the I'm driver button. So now if we tap on I'm passenger, nothing happens. But if we tap on I'm a driver, we get passed on to the I'm a driver screen. Because, well, we set the is driver to be true. And if the state is driver, then we return this driver with generic container that we made earlier. Now let's see. So we just need to do the same thing for the passenger button as well. So let's go ahead. I will just copy and paste this onPress function, but change it to be isPassenger instead. And now it should work for both parties. So I'm a driver. There we have the driver screen with find passengers, and I'm a passenger, where you can enter in your destination. So now we got the a nicer driver or passenger screen, and we passed up the token inside of this app.js parent component as well.